everyone, and welcome to a very special podcast where we're attributing the life of Paul Reubens. Or a lot of you guys may know him for his work on Pee-wee Herman, whether it be with Pee-wee's Big Adventure, Big Top Pee-wee, Pee-wee's Big Holiday, whether you know him for Pee-wee's Playhouse, or any of the other appearances that he did for various talk shows such as David Letterman or Conan O'Brien or Jay Leno or Jimmy Fallon, Jimmy Kimmel, or any of those other appearances. You may know him for his other roles. He was in Batman Returns, Buffy the Vampire Slayer. He was in Matilda. He was also in Nightmare Before Christmas. And recently, one of the last things that he did was he did an episode of Bob's Burgers, the last episode of season 13 called Amelia. So I am here with some very special guests who want to share their memories and recollections on Paul. So I have with me my co-host Arun from the Arun Show.
Hey everybody, really wish we were here on happier times, but let's make it special, and just remember such a great, an amazing actor that Paul Reubens was.
Absolutely. I am here with a very special guest. So you may know her for her appearance as Simone in Pee-wee's Big Adventure, Mrs. Cobblepot in Batman Returns, and as Penny King in Pee-wee's Big Holiday. I am here with Diane Salinger.
Hi. Hello. It's lovely to be here and reminisce about him. And, it's ironic that Paul's birthday is going to be on Sunday, and that is his memorial as well.
Oh,
so I'm sure they did that purposely. It's quite shocking though to have your birthday be on your memorial.
I think it's just shocking that we're talking about this to begin with, because for those of you who don't know, the timeline is that there isn't really a timeline. Like we were told, very shortly before, his death, he apologized to everybody and said, he's been, sick this entire time and no one was the wiser, and the next thing you know that he was just a day later he was gone. And I'm still trying to process that, because Paul Reubens, a guy who was larger than life, a guy who could take a role or take an entity and make it so believable that you couldn't believe that it was him. And there's only one other person I think who's had that ability, in my opinion, that's been Sacha Baron Cohen, for his various roles that he's played. And but I don't think we'll ever see a Paul Reubens ever again. I think he's a one in a lifetime. And I think when we see all the stuff that we're about to talk about today, at least this evening, I think we're going to realize how amazing he actually was.
Yeah. Continuing on with introducing our other guests, we have a puppeteer who provided the performances and voices of Conky, Clocky, and Flory. We have Kevin Carlson.
Hello, greetings.
And last but certainly not least, we have the stop motion animator for the Penny cartoons from season 2 through the last season. And you may also know him for creating various shows such as Hey Arnold. He created Dinosaur Train and Ready, Jet, Go. We have Craig Bartlett.
Hi, everybody.
Yeah, so let's begin. So I want to talk about when you first met with Paul, whether it be through working on your various projects or even just like seeing him on TV or on film. I'd like to know, how did you first get introduced to him? So Diane, why don't you go first?
Well, I was new to LA. And I went in to see a casting director at Warner Brothers named Mindy Marin, who's really brilliant. And she and I were talking and laughing. And she said, Diane, you're really not TV. You really are features. And I'm going to pass your picture and resume on to, and I'd come from mainly Shakespeare and a lot of theater. I did Shakespeare for over 10 years before I came out to LA. And so I get this call to go in to audition with this really amazing casting director named Wally Nacida in the same building, like 2 offices down. And I get there. I have no idea what this is about, but it's a waitress part. And I go into the bathroom and I have no time to prepare, maybe a half hour, very little time. And I think to myself, well, they're never going to give this to me if I sound like I do because I'm from the East Coast and, Ivy League school and snobby area, Chestnut Hill in Philadelphia. And I thought, okay, I've just come out. I really would love to get this part. I don't look like a waitress, so I'll make her Southern. And so I worked on the part and I came in and auditioned for Wally. And I guess it went well. And I left. And then I get a call that they want me that same day to come back to Warner Brothers and to meet Paul and this director, Tim Burton. And so I have like a couple more hours to prepare. And then I go back in. And they're just these two strange boys there, Pee-wee Paul and Tim Burton are in the room with Wally, the casting director. And I had decided in the meantime, since now I had a guy to read with, that I would like bite his fingers. It was Paul. And it was kind of very sexual. And I was biting his fingers and everybody was laughing. And Paul was shocked out of his mind. And and then I left, and then they give me the part, and I remember, I don't talk about this very often, but they send me the script, and I'm reading it, and in the scene, with his dog, it was his dog name was, I think his name was Speck or something.
It is Speck.
And Speck, and in the script, they have Speck licking his butt, and then licking Paul's face, Pee-wee's face. And you might think this is funny, but at the time I was horrified, and I thought, what the hell am I doing? I have come from 10 years of mainly Shakespeare since college, and what am I doing? Doing a movie about a dog licking his butt and then licking his owner's face? And I thought, no, I'm gonna turn this down. I never talk about this, and I think no, this is not for me at all. And then I thought, you've just come out to LA, maybe you should just take it regardless, just bite the bullet. This is one of your first parts you've gotten out here, just do it. So I did it, and I'm so glad I did.
Yeah, well done.
Yeah, fantastic.
I was really on the verge of just saying no.
Wow.
And then the irony is that they never shot that part of the scene, and it was never in the movie anyway. So I would have quit the project for a scene that never got shot.
Wow.
Lesson there.
Yeah. Say yes.
You heard it here first, people.
Someone probably poo-pooed that idea. Oh,
Sorry.
Couldn't help it.
All right.
I first met Paul when I auditioned for the Playhouse, and I was recommended by the gal who actually designed Clocky, or made the new Clocky for the TV show. And so I was supposed to put together 10 or 12 character voices on a tape and bring it in. And I had my mom's old tape recorder with a really crappy microphone, and I quickly got 10, 12 characters on it, and went to the audition. I met Paul and Rick Heitzman and Lynne Stuart, Steve Bender, the producer, and a couple others. And Paul was so great. He's very gracious, super humanitarian, and made you feel real comfortable. And so he goes, do you have a tape? Because he talked really soft. He was a soft talker, but which is hard to believe because Pee-wee is such a high energy character. But Paul was very kind of smooth and relaxed, and he would talk like, well, let's listen to your tape. And so we listened to a couple of the characters, and I think I was reading the room, and I could tell it was like, oh, this not as it just wasn't as zesty as it should have been, I think. And then Paul said, oh, do you mind if I fast forward a little bit? And at that point my heart sunk, but then I said, wait, Paul, you got to hear this one voice. It might be good for your new character, Flory. And so found it on the tape and played it for him, and he goes, "Well, let's listen to that again." And so, because Flory,
Do him well.
I love Flory.
He talks like
That's
this.
a killer voice.
Hi, Miss Yvonne.
I have to like eat the microphone to make it work well. Anyway, so
I always wondered who did that voice.
yeah, so that kind of cemented me, got the job, and boy, I was thrilled because it was like my first kind of big television thing. And then he had me do Knucklehead character.
Yeah, Mr.
He
Knucklehead
knew I
that
was
was
a
featured in the Roxy Theater.
Yeah, and he recommended me because I was a puppeteer, and so that was my first day on set, was doing Mr. Knucklehead. Anyways, yeah, great experience for me because, like I said, I did Conky the robot, so I gave the secret word every episode, and Conky was a robot I was in the center of the stage a lot of the times, or just off to the side and back. So I got to learn so much about production and everything. And one of the things I really remember is watching Paul prepare, for the scene, and we were shooting on 16 millimeter camera, which is kind of old school, and it takes a while for the camera to get up to speed. But while the camera was speeding, I was watching Paul wind himself up into Pee-wee, and his head would move and his body would all and he was right there, and it was just amazing to watch him to do that wind up, his preparation. And he had to be there on set early for makeup. He was there at 5 a.m. every day, and we would stroll in around 10, 11 o'clock, so I always felt kind of bad for that because he worked really hard. And yeah.
Kevin, how old were you then?
I was about 20, 26. No, I was about 26, I think.
Wow.
And I also got to do Clocky, and Clocky had been, Edie McClurg actually did the voice for Clocky when it was alive at the Roxy, and several other people, I guess, did Clocky as well. But I remember it was like first day where Clocky was going to be talking, and in fact, he was introducing a Penny cartoon, I think. Hey, it's time for a Penny cartoon. But I remember Paul says, "Well, Kevin, what are you going to do for the voice for Clocky?" And I was looking at Clocky, and his teeth were, would spin, and they had numbers on them. So I said, "Well, it looks like he has braces." And then Paul said, "You mean a lateral lisp?" Very funny. so that kind of stuck. So, "Guess what time it is, Pee-wee? It's dance time." So that was really yeah. Paul was great. I mean, just he always he cared about us all the time. I mean, the actors and the puppeteers, because we were on set all the time, and so was he. And everybody who walked into the Playhouse just had this immediate awe, because the set design itself was spectacular. Just Wayne White and Gary Panter and Rick Heitzman, those guys, phenomenal. And what I love about it too is Paul just said, "Go, do it, build the Playhouse the way you see it," and they did some innovative things. It's really cool.
Absolutely.
I mean, I guess one question I'd like to ask you, Kevin, is that, working with Paul, I mean, how common was it to get into a, long conversation about, how aspects of how Pee-wee would work and all the other characters on the show? I mean, what was his thought process of going one by one through everybody?
Yeah, no, he cared deeply about the show and the direction and how it was going to play out. But I don't think we had a lot of long conversations per se, because of the hectic schedule of shooting the show. But I do remember, like Wayne White was one of the puppeteers, and Allison Mork, who played Cherry, and Rick Heitzman played Mr. Window, and also they were the flowers too. So, and then we had microphones, where we could listen to each other and talk to each other quietly to not interrupt other people. And there was a lot of funny conversations where the sound guy had to, like, "Hey, you guys better shut up." what are those
You mean
voices?
when it was actually taping, you guys would be
Oh, no.
talking through
No,
it?
we weren't talking during taping, but there was a lot of humorous stuff that happened. For example, one of the microphones, they came out in front. So if you breathed on it, it made a lot of noise. And so like Wayne had a lot of breath and whatever. So he had to have the ball of shame put on the microphone, which is like a big Nerf ball. And every week it got bigger and bigger. And so pretty soon he was talking into a big Nerf
Wow.
ball thing. And we all laughed about that for sure.
That's
But
funny.
Lynne Stuart was great. I mean, just the harmony and Paul's background with the groundlings. I mean, John Paragon with John B. When they would cut up really funny, and it was hard work, but man, he made it fun. He made it really fun.
Absolutely. Now, Craig, why don't you share about how you first met Paul?
It's so great to hear both of you, Diane and Kevin. These stories are wonderful. I can't wait to hear all the rest of them. But I came at it from I felt like a real kind of outsider the way I came to LA. I really owe my animation career to Paul, because I was up in Portland doing claymation for Will Vinton, a very small indie company in Portland that later became Leica. But I was up there in the 80s working in stop motion animation when first Pee-wee's Big Adventure came out. And we were all of us animators were really blown away by the Big Adventure. And there was something about Paul and Pee-wee that was unique. And I kind of already wanted to be part of it. But then the Playhouse came on in 86?
Yes, 86.
And I remember seeing it for the first time in Matt Groening's house. Matt had the first hi-fi TV I'd ever, with the big sound system that I'd ever seen. And when the main title comes on and the Mark Mothersbaugh tune comes on, and you fly around the Playhouse and you go in and all those puppets, I remember it was a big moment in my life. I just sat there with my jaw hanging open, going, how can I leave Portland and come to LA or wherever it is? At the time, I didn't even know where the Playhouse was. The first season was in New York. But I was like, wherever this is, I wonder how I could somehow be part of it. And then I heard that they moved the show to LA for season 2. And I thought, on the hunch that they may need animators, I put a reel together of what I had done for Will Vinton, the claymation I'd done for him. And I got the call. I sent one to Prudence Fenton, because she was the animation producer, and also to Steve Johnson, because somebody had his address too. And it was all old school, making a VHS tape and putting it in the mail. And Prudence called me on an evening in May of I guess it was 86, and said, or maybe it was 87 by then, but she said, hey, the show's moving to LA. We need a new team to do the Penny cartoons. Would you like to come to LA and work on them? And I just was like, hell yes, this is the most amazing offer I will ever get. And I've been thinking about it since Paul died. I've been thinking about what a moment in my life that was. And that weird mid-80s moment when the Playhouse came on and the Big Adventure, both of those things they just stood out like there was nothing like them. Yeah. They stood out in the landscape of entertainment completely like something new. And Paul's, his persona was just immediately, amazing and famous. And so I just think about, like, I've often talked to people about career choices, and it's like, when the opportunity strikes, jump through that door, be ready to just spring through that door. And you also kind of have to have something. I mean, it's not simply that you jump through and then you don't know how to do anything. You better have a thing you do. And I had a little reel of claymation, and that was good enough for me to do Penny. We got there. The animators, unlike the performers who were on set every day, the animators were out in some, far away
basement
warehouse. We were when in season 2 they moved it to a warehouse in Chatsworth.
Yeah,
not air conditioned.
No,
and Chatsworth is not the garden spot of Los Angeles.
Oh.
And so what can I say? I was still just completely over the moon to be there. And I was lucky too. 3 or 4 of us defected from Will Vinton's studio to come down and work on Pee-wee. All of us got that same we were in completely
Oh,
unanimous,
wow.
like, oh crap, this looks like the coolest job ever. And it was because the performers were so amazing. The puppets, when I saw, it's really cool that like Gary, Wayne, Rick, there are a lot of puppet builders too, right?
Yeah.
And it was like a big squad of weirdo artists. And I was like, it was very exciting to me. They were like the cool kids, and so we were out in the warehouse in Chatsworth, and we would come in every couple of weeks and pitch penny storyboards to Pee-wee, and our meetings would be brief. There were a million people around Paul trying to get at him. I can remember one time pitching boards in his trailer. We had shown up at 1 for the meeting, but the meeting happened at 6 because
Right.
that was his day. And he finally went in at 6 o'clock. He'd had a long day. He came into his trailer, which was almost pitch black. And we sat around on the floor around a little low coffee table, and he looked at our boards, and Tom and I were like, oh, it's like a drug deal.
Yeah.
He had the Pee-wee Twins completely off and was he was just kind of whispering in that little soft voice. And then another time coming to pitch to him, and he was in the makeup chair. It was like his long session getting makeup. And I was trying to kind of get in there with my boards, and the hairstylist was like, if you're going to talk to him, you're going to have to back up because I need to work here. And she was just like completely pushing me out of the way. So we animators were very low on the totem pole of this world of Pee-wee, but
Yeah, I remember on the Playhouse too, like if we'd break for lunch and there was a whole line of people with prototype Pee-wee toys and prototypes from JCPenney to Walmart to the whole list, and they'd all line up and just wait. And Paul would sit in the purple poof that was in the middle of the Playhouse, and you could just tell he's just like so exhausted, but he goes, yeah, I like that, but I don't know.
He struck me as a yes or no guy.
Yeah, he didn't
good
linger,
or it was not.
Yeah,
and that was all there was to it.
He didn't linger. He either felt it or he didn't.
Yeah, and so when we were there at the same time, Kevin, it was like, that. Don't you feel like he was at absolute peak power? Like everything was going. His movie was a hit. His TV show was a hit. Toys were being made. He was a kind of a phenomenon at that moment. So it's just super fun to be close to that kind of magic when it's happening. And,
right.
I was thrilled to come from far away and be in that world.
You know what? And I discovered too that I didn't realize that the money that he made from the JCPenney line of clothing and toys and whatnot, he gave a whole bunch to a foundation for children, abused children or something. It's just like phenomenal. He was on top of the world at that time, So
it's so rare to have somebody who is like, at the top of his game, but then also very self-aware at the time. And I think that's a part of Paul. I think that gets lost in translation of things sometimes. I think if you look at some of the stuff that he's done, like, it's amazing how, he can handle, all of a sudden going from, the Paul Reubens show, which was like, started off in the 1980s, then all of a sudden like Pee-wee's Big Adventure comes out and it's like, oh, everyone knows who he is now. And to have that just phenomenal jump in the 80s. And I think maybe, I think Paul came in the 80s at the right time, because the 80s was like, a time of change. It was, people wanted to see more like, not unsafe stuff, but I think they wanted to see something weird. They wanted to see something crazy. And Paul Reubens gave the viewers that fix. They got to see something insane. And so I think that's, I think he came in at exactly the right time when the audience was, and I think you, Craig, and I think you, Kevin, and I think you, Diane, all came in at the same time, because everybody was crying out like, well, we're sort of known for, safe, and friendly entertainment. Where's the risk? Where's the, the insanity? Where is the mayhem? And Paul Reubens walked in and gave everyone what they wanted.
Yeah, I do agree, especially around with cinema. I mean, you have a lot of you made a lot like massive risks, and they're still remembered for it. You Ghostbusters, Back to the Future, E.T., various other films, and a film that was based off of a guy who showed up on stage on the Groundlings, and then he had the Roxy Theater, and then he had his performances in the talk shows. It's like, okay, this is probably for a niche audience. How can we blow this into the mainstream? Well, have a movie that's absolutely insane and people will go crazy for it.
That was Tim Burton's first feature, wasn't it?
Yes, it was.
Well, well, kind of yes and no. He did this little, because he made a special screening for me and E.G. Daily to see it on the Warner Brothers lot before we began shooting. And he did this little tiny movie about two dogs called Frankie and Weenie.
Oh, the
Frankie
Frank and
and
Weenie
Weenie.
one. That's right.
Yeah, I do remember that.
It was about Frankenstein, and it was two dogs.
Yeah.
So he did do that, but Pee-wee's Big Adventure really is his first real big movie. Yes.
Such a cool movie.
But I also wanted to say something. I think Arun was talking about this, that this is not to detract at all from Paul, but there was one other star who brought, even though it was very different, it was like the eternal boy, the puer aeternus, and that's Jerry Lewis in another the earlier generation, and that's that goofy childlike boy who does things that nobody else would dare to do. And this is an archetype. And I have this theory about why certain actors become stars. And that's because usually, I mean, Meryl Streep is an exception, and there are exceptions to this, but like Jack Nicholson, but usually people become stars because they embody an archetype for that time. Mm-hmm. And, Jerry Lewis did it for that generation, like the 50s or 60s, and then Paul did it, and everyone got to be a child again, watching it. You got to be a child again. But my agents didn't like the movie because they perceived themselves as being adults, and so you have to have like a very developed inner child or be a child yourself, to really get it. So there were people that were quite turned off by Pee-wee's Big Adventure when it first came out. And those were the agents,
To be honest with you, I mean, like, we could go through like the entire library of comedies, whether it's TV shows, whether it's that, and like the suits all in their, their fancy bow ties and things like that. We'll say, oh, well, I don't think this is what the audience are going to want. And like, how many times have we had like, John Cleese or like other comedic entertainers who have given us Monty Python's Flying Circus, Fawlty Towers, when Father Ted first came out in Ireland and then became a worldwide success. It's just, the suits don't know nothing. As far as I'm concerned, it's here's the plate, everyone's eating it,
Show business is full of anecdotes about how nobody thought something was going to work, and then it blew
Tony Bennett was told by his singing teacher to give up singing, that he didn't have a chance.
Well, there you go.
I'm glad he didn't take that advice.
No,
absolutely not. Yeah, so going into behind the scenes of the film, I mean, I'd love to know about your stuff, Diane. I mean, like, filming from the diner all the way to when you're inside the dinosaur head. So yeah, why don't you share about that?
Life. Well, there's one story. I came to the set one day, back then you could just go and get on the set of Warner Brothers. You just went and you just walked in. And at least that's how I remember it. And I went to the set, and they were shooting Judd Omen's and Paul's descent in the convertible,
with Mickey, yes, and they were pulled over by the cops.
And but this is later when they're in the woods, and the convertible is falling from the sky, and then. And then, the convertible top becomes a parachute, and then they're screaming, and Paul hugs him, and then Judd pushes him away in disgust, and they fall, And after they shot the scene, I went up to Paul and Tim and I said, listen, I'm very psychic or intuitive, and I just want to tell you that I think this is going to be bigger than any of us have any idea about. And it turned out to be the truth.
That's true. It did. I mean, it had
You know,
like a
we
Really
small.
made money, didn't it? I'm trying to
It
remember.
it did. It had like a
Warner
small
Brothers had
$6 million budget, and it made 40 million.
Yes, but you see, they weren't even going to put in that much initially, and then they started seeing the dailies. I think the DP told me this, or maybe it was Tim. I don't remember. And they started watching the dailies, and they went, "Oh my God, this is bizarre and wonderful." And then they started putting more money in as we were shooting it,
Oh,
because
cool.
the budget expanded like by twice as much when they saw what they were getting.
Good for Warner Brothers. Good for them to
Yes.
watch those
Yes.
dailies and decide that this is worth more. I mean, that's a really, I don't think that's not a the kind of thing that would be happening now.
No,
Well,
I
that's
don't
it.
think so.
I mean, I think Warner Brothers probably had more of their heads screwed on probably in the 80s and the 90s compared to where they are today, where, I mean, well, anyway, I digress.
Yeah, let's move on. So continue, Dan.
So continue. What?
Yeah.
Telling
Tell us what happens
stories.
next. Yeah.
Well, Paul was really, really generous, and I think I'd only done one horror movie called Creature before Pee-wee's Big Adventure, and I really knew nothing about camera because I came from theater, and it's extremely different. And Paul, that first day, two things. The first day, I was in the hair and makeup trailer, and all of a sudden, and we were near the equestrian center, in the valley. You know what that is? That's Burbank, yes. And we were in the hair and makeup trailer, and then the hair and makeup trailer just started. It went back and forth several times, and this woman got into the trailer and stepped up onto the steps and entered the trailer, and she said, "What the fuck? What the fuck?" Like this, and she's cursing up a storm. She said, "I couldn't find this place. Who did it?" And she's going on, and I said, "You must be Large Marge."
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I'm playing Large Marge. That was my introduction to Large Marge.
No
And
way.
then precious. And then let's see. And then Paul, that first day, and we were shooting the bus scene where I'm getting on the bus and I say, "Au revoir, Pee-wee," and he says, "Au revoir, Simone," and he tells me about the Alamo not having a basement. And Paul and I, it was our first setup of the first scene, and he says to me, and I'm not going to you do a great imitation of his voice. That was wonderful. I can't do it, but he said, I'm going to give you the, you kiss me, and you put your face by the cameras, and I'll put my face behind. So it'll be your close up. Very, very amazing. Very amazing. I had no idea, I just, because theater's very different. And so and so I've got my face there, and Paul's behind me when we're kissing, when I first run up to him, at the bus stop. So that he was very, very generous, and very sweet. And oh God. Oh, okay. Here's another story, and then I want to give it to someone else because I'm getting tired.
Fair enough.
I think it wasn't that day, but the guy who played Andy, and probably it was when we went to Cabazon to shoot the dinosaur, the exterior dinosaur, which everybody knows has been painted with Paul's outfit.
Yes.
Amazing
Bravo.
tribute to him. And so anyway, Andy, I walk up to Andy, and this is probably the tallest man I've ever seen in my own life. And I'm tall. I was like 5'10" and a half, 5'11". I'm now 5'9" and a half. But I was about 5'10", 5'10" and a half. And my forehead came up to about where his belly was.
Wow.
And he was really, really tall. And I didn't know quite what to say. And he was in costume. And I put my hand on his belly and I said, "Great padding." And he said, "That's not padding." God. That was my introduction to him. And we never really got along very
that was your opener.
That was my opener. Yeah, great padding. Not
Nice.
Diane, I have to ask, when you're outside, I know you're there at Cabazon. When you're inside and you can see the teeth and it's all red lit up.
Oh, that's in Warner Brothers. They built that.
Okay,
that
they built
was
that
on
on
the
the set.
soundstage. Yeah.
So did you? I can't remember. It felt like there's a door that opens and you run in the exterior.
Yes, that's when we go in, when I invite him to the dinosaur, and that's the exterior in Cabazon.
Yeah.
And then we came out that way. And I remember I had to get to Warner Brothers at 4:30 in the morning to be driven out. I mean, I don't think I slept, and I think I went to bed at 2 and I had to get up at 4:30. And they drove us out there, and it was freezing because it's a desert. It's like being on the moon. And it was freezing. And they gave me little what do you call them? Thermal underwear, but
thermal
wasn't
underwear,
very much. And we had to look. It had to look like it was a balmy, spring or summer night. Yeah. And Paul and I were just freezing. And and then when the light finally came up, because we were shooting and it was dark, but it was before dawn, and it was supposed to look like it was nighttime after I had said to him in the kitchen, will you come and watch the sunrise with me? And so we shot everything. I was my real introduction to how everything shot out of sequence and night for day, day for night. I mean, it was freezing, and it was like 6 a.m, and the sun hadn't come up yet, 5:30, and we were shooting it like it was night. And then when the dawn came up, it was like the next morning that, Paul and I had spent the night together in the dinosaur, and Andy was there with the bone ready to kill him. Yeah.
Diane, when you were shooting that stuff, did Tim Burton, since this was pretty new, early in his career, did he seem like he was kind of figuring out stuff as he went along, or did he already seem super, just like a genius?
It's interesting you're saying this. When I did Batman Returns with him, and I thought it was like 2 years later. It was 6 years later, and the scandal had just happened. And I think, frankly, between us, and people listening to this, I think Tim gave this to Paul and me as a way of getting Tim back on the horse after that horrible scandal. And when I came to the set on Batman Returns, he said, "Do you want to see my storyboards?" And I said, "Yes." And he took me into his trailer, and this is amazing. They're paintings. He was a graphic artist before he was a director, and there's like the one painting I remember. So it's not like sequential kind of storyboarding. It was like maybe one picture for each scene, and it was charcoal, and it was Michelle Pfeiffer as Catwoman had fallen to the ground, and all these and she was dead, and all these cats were licking her back to life. And he had this most amazing drawing of it. And then, not that long after I think we shot Pee-wee's Big Adventure, they had like a little gallery where they showed his drawings. Cool. And in Paris there was a big show, a Tim Burton show. And so these are actually, that's his storyboards, are his paintings.
Wow.
I guess it does make a lot of sense, considering that he did work as Disney as like an artist and an animator at the time.
Yeah. Oh, interesting. I didn't know that.
Yeah, I think he worked on a few movies. I think he worked on like Fox and the Hound and the Black Cauldron right before he left, and he did his movie productions.
Yeah, man, Tim Burton and Brad Bird both hanging out, little squirts hanging out at Disney, with the old guys, like not liking what they were doing. It's amazing.
It's really interesting.
Yeah, so there's a lesson there. Like, if you don't like what you're doing, get out.
That's a lesson that's pretty relevant.
Their way somewhere else. You're right.
It does make you wonder because, like, in Disney at the time, we were in the doldrums at that time. Like, the Black Cauldron was like, was the.
It's a bad time for animation in general. The mid '80s were things were kind of at their lowest, I think, in animation production.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it was also there was a lot of like sharks also circling the water, like because me and Patricia went through like all the movies like Eastern Europe and like various other people trying to like be the next Disney, if you will. Cosgrove Hall did the BFG at the time, thinking that, oh hey, this is our opportunity to potentially do something that could show us as like being better than Disney. And it does make you wonder though, like if Tim had hung around for a little longer and then entered into the Disney Renaissance era, it makes you wonder, like, what could have been. But, obviously you can't always predict these things. So, like, but hey, he did The Nightmare Before Christmas. So,
That's true.
Tim is extremely humble and very soft-spoken, but would laugh. And he and Paul really got along, and they would joke a lot. And not so much on Batman Returns because... the scandal had happened, and Paul
big of a budget too. Yeah.
Hey, Diane, did you know I actually was a penguin in Batman Returns?
I didn't know that they had. I mean, Danny was the penguin, but they had the real emperor penguins in the and our breath was freezing, and we were freezing in the scene when we throw the baby over the bridge. And there were real penguins in that water. I didn't realize that they actually had other human penguins.
Well, puppets. They were puppet penguins.
Were you in a costume, or were you? No, had a puppet.
I had a puppet. I was working a puppet with my,
in that scene.
No, we were mostly in Danny DeVito's lair.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we were peppered throughout amongst the real penguins. So
yes. Yeah.
Well, there's your connection.
Small world.
Yeah, it
puppet
is.
World.
Small puppet world. There you go.
Small puppet world, exactly.
I still have scary visions of like Danny DeVito in that penguin get up, like it's just this how Tim Burton made him into like that
and it was because of them working on Batman Returns was the reason why Danny brought Paul in to do Matilda in the first place.
Okay.
Yeah. So one more question for you, Diane, and then I'll leave it to Kevin and Craig to talk about the TV show, but I need to know about your experiences working on Big Holiday.
Paul had changed a lot, and we had gotten together with him. E.G. and I would get together with him in the Hollywood Forever, and they'd show Pee-wee, and we had a blast, hiding behind the trees before Paul would introduce us. And I called us Pee-wee Swans, like Capote swans, and so I'd seen him over the years, but not so much, and. So I went to audition, the first audition with the casting director. She's really wonderful, Eileen Knight, and she laughed, and seemed to like what I did. And it was they wanted Katharine Hepburn, although I don't think they got Hepburn's family permission, so they called her Penny King, but it was Hepburn. And the second audition, I came into the room and I go not towards Eileen, but to Paul, because I hadn't seen him in a couple of years. And there's the director there, John Lee. And I come towards Pee-wee and he backs up from me, for Paul. And he backs up from me and he says, I want you to know that I don't want you in this movie.
What?
Yeah.
Wow.
And he said, I don't want anyone from any of my other movies in this movie. And I how do you react? I just started howling with laughter. And I was thinking, inside, Paul, get a life. That's like 30 years ago, what? And I knew that that's why none of us were in Pee-wee's Big Top, is because he didn't want anyone from Big Adventure and Big Top. And but I was really shocked, and it really affected my audition. I was extremely nervous because of that, and I had to start over again. And I could see that Paul, he continued after he said, I want you to know, I don't want you in this movie, but everyone else thinks you're perfect for it.
And what was his reason for saying that?
That he didn't want anybody in any of his other movies in this movie.
I guess it makes sense considering that each of the Pee-wee films are in different continuity. They have nothing to do with one another. They have nothing to do with the show. They're their own. They belong in their own specific universe. So I guess if you mix up different characters, it feels like, oh, is this a continuation of this movie or is this a continuation of the show? Which is why you even still to this day, you never see any of the movies featuring any of the characters from the Playhouse or any of the characters from the previous movies. They're their own self-contained
That's very
story.
interesting. That's very interesting. But yeah, I was very shocked though. I was very shocked. And so then
he could have put it better, couldn't he?
He could have said nothing. He could have said nothing. And so then I get this call from Paul, and he says, "Hi, Diane, it's Paul." And I said, "Hi." And he said, "I want you to know, I want you to play the part." He said, and I said, "Really?" And he said, "Yeah." And he said, "But why were you so nervous?" And I just
what year was this again?
What?
What year was this again?
Well, the movie came out in 2016, and we shot it probably in 2015.
Yeah, I think. Well, I don't know what was going on with that.
So anyway, it was weird, and other weird things happen on the set. I think he had a huge amount of pressure. But then, and he wasn't the same person that I had known, all those years before. But then at the end, he called me up and he said, "I just want you to know, I really love what you did in the movie. And you're one of my favorite characters in the whole movie. I thank you. You did a wonderful job." So and I've seen him since. I saw him when it was the beginning of his tour that was cut short because of COVID. I don't know what it was called, but it was the show that went to.
It was the
that
Pee-wee.
went to
I think it was
Broadway.
what was it? The Pee-wee's Big Adventure 35th anniversary tour.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
I heard about that,
and he showed the movie, and he picked each one. There were several of us there. Joe Manganiello was in the audience, and E.G. and I, and he made each one of us stand up and praised us, and it was very sweet. And then we went backstage, and he was really, really sweet.
Yeah.
And I think he just had incredible pressure from and I've tried to piece together the chronology, and yes, it's longer than 6 years when he knew he had cancer, but I think maybe he wasn't well then too. I just have a feeling, and he didn't know it. And but he was really wonderful.
I think also amongst all of that is that all of a sudden, after some of the scandals that he'd been involved in, and the fact that he'd also been out of the light for a while, like he'd done voice work, this, there, and the other, and then all of a sudden, Pee-wee comes back into the focal point again, and next thing you know, he's doing commercials, he's got the Broadway play also, and he's got various other endorsements, and next thing you know, the one weird thing I thought was quite strange was when he turned up on an episode of WWE Monday Night Raw, and I'll give everybody the context, is that WWE always had an authority figure. So Mr. McMahon would come out, basically make everyone's life miserable. Stone Cold Steve Austin would come out and beat the hell out of him, and then that would be the episode of the show. But they did a point at a time when he wasn't the authority figure, and so they were figuring out in storyline who was basically going to be doing what and controlling the show. So they did this whole thing where guest hosts would come in. So I think Ozzy Osbourne, I think, was in one episode, and I think some other the Muppets were in one episode as well. I don't know how that worked, but they did it. And then Pee-wee Herman turned up on one episode of the show, and he got to the ring, and you could tell he was trying his best to make the whole, like, you're talking about a auditorium full of, like, 20,000 people, and you could tell he was trying to, like, make them all laugh. And some people were like on the joke, like Michael Cole, who was commentator at the time, was really getting into the whole vibe of, like, because he grew up with Pee-wee Herman, but he had Jerry the King Lawler, who'd never grown up with him, who said this was the dumbest thing he'd ever seen. And so, like, yeah, it was just then all of a sudden.
I've seen a clip of that recently, and I thought it was very courageous that he even tried to do it. I just thought that was gutsy. I do want to say one more thing on behalf of Paul with the experience on Pee-wee's Big Holiday, is that when he called me to say I had the part, he said that because he hired me, he had to rethink casting for the movie, and then he put in 4 or 5 other people who had worked on different shows with him after me, and I thought that was really nice. And it was really nice to see those people in hair and makeup afterwards, so so go on, Aaron, what you were saying though about this, about that.
Yeah, so then they got the Miz, who's like he's whether anyone thinks he's a good wrestler or whether he thinks he's just an overrated reality TV host is like in the eyes of the beholder. But they got him to come out, and he did this one thing where, like, he said, "Oh, I didn't grow up with Pee-wee Herman. I grew up with He-Man." And then this was when people were realizing that He-Man was kind of ambiguously, like, on the other side of things, if you will. So Paul Reubens basically goes up to him and says, "Well, if you like He-Man so much, why don't you marry him?" And that got a good chuckle out of everybody. But yeah, so whether that went down well with everyone backstage, I have no idea. But I've yet to hear the stories about, like, what happened behind the scenes of that. But yeah, it was sort of a weird experience,
but
really.
That was the line he used in Pee-wee's Big Adventure too.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
If you like him so much, why don't you marry him? He put that in Pee-wee's Big Adventure.
Well, I think at the time, I think, given the fact that He-Man was starting to have, like, people starting to make fun of him for his more, for that, I think that's the reason why the joke probably landed a lot harder, I think, than probably they did, like, in Big Adventure. But, I don't know.
Yeah.
On the TV show, he said he loved fruit salad.
And they get married, don't they?
Yes, they did.
Why don't you get married? And so he married.
Yeah, I thought of that too. I'm like, I'm pretty sure there was a wedding on the Playhouse as well.
That's true, he did. That's the only time in which he actually married something. It was the fruit salad. And then the Broadway show, he wore an abstinence ring. Yeah, but I mean, I actually do agree with you, Diane. I'm sure that there was a lot of pressure that he was going through, considering that he had just brought the character back after, being on the back shelf for 15 years, and he tried to start his career again. He was on Murphy Brown. He did he was in Mystery Men, then he did Blow, and his career was on the verge of coming back, and then the second incident happened again, and it just put him on the back burner again. And then 2007 he appeared in the Spike TV awards, and it was like his major comeback. And then 2009 was when he decided to bring back the character fully, and everybody was celebrating. The show came out, and I'm sure that oh man, this is my third attempt of trying to bring back the character. I want to be able to make sure that this is going to be the one to stick. I mean, if you remember, like, many years ago, he was trying to pitch those 2 projects, the movie based off of the show, and then a darker Pee-wee movie where it's like an homage to, like, Valley of the Dolls, where he just goes into a dark corner of his career after becoming a successful country star. So I mean, he wanted to do those movies for a long time, and then eventually Big Holiday was supposed to be like the jump point of him, starting Pee-wee again. And then I guess maybe around that time, that's when it hit.
Yeah, I mean, like, but I think also, I mean, Pee-wee's character, I mean, whether we say this is, like, within the continuity of the character, I think, given the fact that it's been in sort of very awkward places, like, I think everybody remembers, like, the very awkward PSA that he did, where he basically held, like, a vial of crack up and said, "This is crack."
Well, I mean, he had to do it because that was part of his sentence.
It was, yeah, and but I mean, it's that it still lives in infamy in some way.
If you
And,
take it out
so,
of
yeah.
context, sure, but if you know what the context is, it's a little bit more understandable.
Yeah, it is, and so I think it's. I think it makes you wonder. Like I think you wonder if Paul Reubens, I think, was also quite unhappy when sometimes like his creation that he had, was taken in directions where he didn't really want to go in with it. Like we talk about like all these cameos and we talk about like all this stuff. I mean, like it makes you wonder. Did he feel like sometimes he wasn't really in control of like what he wanted to do, and like in some ways, whether it was either like for financial gain or whether it was for because other executives at the time were saying, oh hey, why do you make Pee-wee Herman do this?
That's actually a really interesting
Yeah.
question. I want to actually go over to Kevin and Craig on this. I mean, have you ever heard any executive stories in which like they needed to make changes because of maybe like parent no saying you can't do this, or maybe any executives who are trying to like put some strict rules? I like to know about this. Has there ever been any case like that?
I feel like executives in my super 35-year career, I've seen things morph a lot, and it feels like the execs that control TV and movies have a lot more control over it now than they used to. I was really lucky in the 90s when I was in the early days of Nickelodeon. I felt like we were given a ton of rope and the opportunity to make our own way. It was like the Wild West compared to now. And so now I feel like a lot of cool, crazy stuff simply would not happen because execs are too busy second guessing what's going to go and what's going to not go, and what's going to be offensive or what's going to be canceled. And so, those were the early days. They had the mark of just something completely new and weird.
Yeah, it's also an ego thing as well. Like, they want to say to themselves, like, oh, hey, I was involved in this thing, even though it's just this.
When the thing works, they're like, yeah, it was my idea.
That's my idea. Yeah, I'll take the credit for that.
Yeah, of course.
I do remember a scene in one of the episodes that they did kind of the European version of the scene just for fun, so it was really suggestive and kind of sexual and funny, very funny. Yeah. But it's like he even
did it air?
It's the European version.
Yeah, what's the bit? What happened?
Oh, you know what? I can't remember. I just remember the European version.
Well, I remember
that was one thing that happened in these types of shows. Like I remember there was a show here in the UK called Rainbow, and which had like and they did like this one episode where basically it was just them fooling around. It never made to air, but it did leak at one point, and like it was just an episode they did the show where it was just full of sexual innuendo. Yeah. And it was just it's up there on YouTube. You can watch it. It's the most hilarious thing.
Yeah, I think I remember two stories that Paul shared in an interview with the guys behind Comedy Bang Bang at South by Southwest, where there was two instances where the show was told, oh, you can't do this. It was in the first episode where he was sticking pencils in potatoes and they were telling him you can't do that. And then the second time was the episode in which when Miss Yvonne was, setting up the smoke detector, and then she says, "Oh, I don't have to worry about that, Pee-wee. I set up my smoke detector in my bedroom under the bed." And then they actually changed it. They actually like redubbed it, in which Miss Yvonne says, "Oh, I have a smoke detector, Pee-wee. I have it in the kitchen under the sink."
Hey,
yeah.
Everything okay, Dan?
That's exactly what happened.
I think we sent Diane off into like the void of space.
Yeah.
What
happened?
Well,
yeah. So that's I guess there was like various moments where the show was actually like they were telling people, it's like, oh yeah, we can't do this in the show, but I mean that's like the only times in which I've heard of some people saying, oh yeah, we can't do this on the show, Paul. Can you like do this again, but not be so obvious? We don't want to scar the kids. And I remember him saying like, if I'm not scarring the kids, because if the kids already know what the innuendo is, that's the parents' fault.
It's true.
Yeah.
True. Yeah, exactly.
I love the line where Flory actually says, "Hey, Miss Yvonne, come stand over me." Because he was in the
Yeah. And remember in the original the Pee-wee show that he did for HBO,
Oh yeah,
he had the little mirrors on his
he had the
shoes.
mirrors on his shoe.
Oh God, how
Yes.
That's
funny.
pretty much, that was the tone from
A
the
little
very
racy, a
beginning.
little
Yeah.
racy.
Yeah, and that was the appeal of it, is that, both kids and adults can get into it. And I think
And
that's
on
great. I
very
think that's
different
why it's,
levels.
yeah, it
Yeah.
And
works on different
also,
levels.
the more you see, for instance, Pee-wee's Big Adventure, the better it gets, and the more innuendos you get, even as an adult.
Oh, yeah.
It just keeps growing.
Yeah.
It keeps giving.
Yeah,
Yeah,
there's a lot of
Pee-wee
It
has the
gets
very
better
best
and
bits.
better.
When
Yeah,
you're
there's
up
a
in
lot-
the when you're up in the dinosaur and Andy's at the door, that's the funniest stuff in the whole movie.
Yeah.
A Large Marge. I think Large Marge is my
Oh,
all-time.
Large Marge is
Yeah,
fabulous too.
absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean,
I
you
think
have
as long as we all live in this world, I think large margins will just live like for eons past because how long was it ago when large Marge actually passed away herself? I mean, like
I
it
think she
was
passed away like several years ago because
yeah.
Yes.
yeah, I think it was like
And so
around
did Andy, and so did Magic. Was it Magic Mike? Not Magic Mike. Magic Larry.
yeah,
Magic
Amazing Larry,
died.
yeah.
Amazing Larry.
Amazing.
Oh,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm.
man.
And
Well, listen, I have to go, but I wanted to tell you guys and anyone listening that I'm going to be doing a pictorial tribute to Paul on Sunday, which is his birthday and the memorial service. So go on my Instagram or Facebook. It's Diane Louise Salinger. And I'd love you to share some more experiences and, share how much you love Paul. And I would love it if you could go on my Instagram and Facebook and just share more experiences with people. It would be lovely.
absolutely.
Oh,
Would you like to
fantastic.
say one final
Yeah.
statement right before you go?
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead.
Let's talk about your big butt.
Yes. All right. Thank you so much, Diane.
Thanks, Diane.
I'll see you Sunday, Diane.
Okay.
Bye.
See you
Yeah.
Sunday. Bye. Bye.
So, Craig, did you know the Kyoto brothers?
I've met the Kyoto brothers only one time when I came down in like in the late '80s. Pretty quickly, I was looking all around town for who was doing stop motion,
Right.
and I visited them at their studio, and they were lovely.
Yeah, and they did Large Marge. They did
They were the ones that animated Large Marge.
Yeah.
It will live in eternity.
Yeah. Hey, also, Craig, I wanted to ask you about the voices for Penny were different every time. It was just different girls, right? Just different young girls talking.
Real kids, and that was basically when we got the job to do Penny. Penny had been started by those Aardman guys. Brilliant, just the best clay animators in the whole world, the funniest, best animators of claymation, in my opinion, in the whole world. And so I didn't want to mess it up at all, man. And we came with nothing but respect. Tom and Elizabeth. It was Tom Gasick, Elizabeth Butler, Bruce McKean, and me were the new two teams doing. Each of us split the order of pennies and just made them side by side. And we were all pals, and we all agreed that we wanted to just do the most respectful continuation of Penny possible. So we learned that they had used real girls that had just been invited by friends in New York. They were just like co-workers and friends who had little girls.
How
And
fun.
so very non-union, very non-pro. And so we kept that up.
Very real. Very real.
We just looked around LA for same deal. Who has a kind of a kid in the house who likes to tell a story. And Paul was not very happy with the voices of the LA girls. He said, they're not as funny as the New York girls. New York girls have more attitude.
Yeah,
and so
more
we're like, all right, well, we'll work really hard to try to get these kids to kind of pipe up and tell their stories. And I loved it. It was so fun that real non-pro girls, you just sit down with them at a microphone and say, well, what happened today? And the kid was like, at school, there's this kid, he threw up, and then the janitor had to come and put some orange stuff down and mop it up. And then the kid, so they were telling these stream of consciousness. They were just being interviewed.
Yeah.
Telling stream of consciousness stories.
And you guys came up with all the action in the background and all the stuff. I mean, how fun was that?
It was really fun. They took the tape. We edited the interviews to 1 minute because they were supposed to be a minute long. A brilliant, a 60-second cartoon is a great thing. And once we had them edited, old style track reader would do the sheets for us. So we had exposure sheets, 24 frames per second, so 4 seconds on a page, and they would break down the lip sync of our recording, and then we would match. We had mirrors, tiny little mirrors taped to our stands, and we would do, I'm making an S sound, and it's like, and so we would animate it, and that was the only thing that had to happen was lip sync for Penny. Other than that, there was no plan at all, and we would storyboard it and show it to Paul, like in the time it takes her to tell this 1 minute story about going to the circus. This is how it's going to play, and in fact, then we play him a cassette of the 1 minute performance. Yeah. And he would, so based on, storyboard visuals and the performance of the kid, sometimes he'd say, no, I don't think that kid sounds doesn't sound excited enough, or doesn't sound
right.
They're not as good as New York.
Yeah. Did you do the dinosaurs too at all?
No, that was done right next to us by Don Waller. Was Don had there were 2 of them, I think. I remember Don though. Don Waller animated the Dinosaur Family. A guy named John McLaughlin from Boston, a big, tall Irish guy from Boston. He did the Ant Farm.
Oh,
and that guy, he was such a cool. I mean, these characters, man, these people were all huge characters, and I knew it. I was like, I found my tribe, man. I've come to LA, and I found all these great weirdos, and I just want to be here forever.
So great. I just thinking about how Paul used the picture phone, and now we live in an age where we could pull down a thing behind us.
God, right? Yes,
he was way ahead of his time.
Yeah, and it was so full of bits. That was what appealed to me when I saw it on TV and got my mind blown. I was like, there've got to be a bunch of different units of little animated bits being made for every week's show. I thought it made me wonder, like, how long of a script do they write? How many minutes of live action Playhouse stuff, and how much of these bits? And it was just, God, of course, there's just been nothing like it. Do you remember when the Playhouse ended, and for a couple of years, people were all kind of pitching a Pee-wee's Playhouse ripoff?
Yeah, like Beekman's World and some of those other ones.
We watched them and we were like, it needs Pee-wee.
Yeah, Pee-wee's he changed the face of Saturday morning television.
Yeah. I felt that way too. Like at the very end of the 80s, you had the Playhouse and you had the new Mighty Mouse, Ralph Bakshi's crazy, with the young John Crispolucci animating on that. Yeah. Those 2 seemed to just kind of blow up Saturday morning, just like blow it to bits.
Yeah, I mean, there was a lot of them on CBS. You had Garfield and Friends, and there was let's see, there was Rock and Wrestling. There was a lot of other stuff. I mean, you had ABC, CBS, and NBC. I mean, those were like the 3 main networks. And I mean,
I kind of felt like that paved the way for Nickelodeon to come in and take it in the 90s.
Yeah. And Pee-wee's Playhouse was the only Saturday morning show that was not fully animated. It was mostly live action with a few bits of animation, which is why
multimedia.
It was multimedia, which is why it stood out. I'm sure that you are familiar with Cassine Gaines. He wrote the book Inside Pee-wee's Playhouse. He even wrote it in his excerpt where he was talking about that. It was during when Ronald Reagan was pushing the idea of having like education television, and Pee-wee's Playhouse was the one that like met the check mark on everything. It was creative, it was unique, you learned some things with it, it was fun for kids and adults, and that's why it dominated in the 80s.
Yeah, and you could learn how to marry fruit salad.
Yeah, exactly. You can learn how to marry fruit partner. Salad. Yes.
It's funny, like, we had so many of I think here in the UK, not everyone wanted to not everyone was trying to be Pee-wee Herman, but we had a lot of the live action, you'd have the presenter, and you'd have the kids in the audience, and they would do the competitions, or they would do the segments, and then after that they'd go to the cartoon show, and then they would have that sort of thing. And we had that as a tradition between the 80s and the 90s for a very long time, and there was different variations, but nothing really caught on as much, I think, as Pee-wee's Playhouse, I think, at the time. And I think they were trying to somewhat either trying to emulate that, or even trying to emulate Wienerville, at some point. But for some strange reason, like while we do, I mean, the people who ended up doing those shows did finally go on to like do bigger things. I mean, there's one guy who did children's television for a long time. He then became, the one of the presenters for one of the big, Monday morning, shows here in the UK, and then someone went off to basically do like, the One Show, which is like the biggest BBC show that you could have here in the UK. And so like, I think the fact that Pee-wee was able to say to everybody, okay, here's what we've got, what can you do? And then everyone said, oh, well, we can do this and we can do that, and here's this show and here's that show and here's this thing that would be basically what our version of Pee-wee's Playhouse would be. And then that would then go on to escalate the careers of everybody else. That could only be a good thing and a really good legacy to leave.
Yeah, I hope that Pee-wee brought together so many amazing artists, the designers and the puppeteers and the puppet manufacturers and the set makers and stuff. I hope that all of them got a big career boost from that.
It's like instant street cred, right? I worked on Pee-wee's Playhouse. It's like all of a sudden you're
yeah.
Yeah.
And it's funny, Lawrence Fishburne, Cowboy Curtis.
Yes. Oh my God.
I mean, and we would be talking and he would say, call me Larry. And so Allison, who played Cherry, we'd always just go, hey, Larry. And then Alice and I both worked with him on the Muppets that was on ABC a while back. And we sat by his dressing room until he came out and we surprised him. Larry!
Oh my God. Does everyone call him Lawrence now?
It's Lawrence now.
Larry Fishburne, come on, the 14-year-old Larry Fishburne in Apocalypse Now.
I know. Can you believe it?
Indelibly. I remember when I realized Cowboy Curtis was clean from Apocalypse Now. It's just like, mind blown.
I know. And Esapatha Murkison, and the gal who played Renee, Mrs. Renee, Suzanne.
Oh, yeah, Suzanne Kent.
Yeah. And it's so funny. She's, I don't celebrate Christmas, P. Why not? Because I'm Jewish, and it's just so funny to me. She was so funny. And she was a groundling, I guess, as well.
Okay, sure.
But I was going to tell a story about how the king of cartoons comes bursting through the door. Hello, and he was a Shakespearean actor, and so he goes, we're going to have I'm dry. I'm dry. I need water. It's just so funny because he was so Shakespearean, big theatrical.
He seemed like he was in another world, man.
Yeah, it was fun. We had fun with him.
I'll bet.
I mean, like I said, the whole time we were there, it was fun. We had fun. Yeah. I mean, hard work, but fun,
It's really cool that group, the group that came and set it all up in LA, they did seem like they were all a bunch of like-minded people who were really aware of how cool it was, what they were doing, and they were all happy to be there.
Yeah. Good times.
No kidding.
Yeah, so I guess we can wrap things up. So yeah, why don't you give your final, thoughts, tributes, memories towards Paul?
You go ahead, Kevin.
Well, like a lot of people, Paul, every birthday I had in April, he would send me funny GIFs and wish me a happy birthday. But this 2 years ago, he sent me an actual cameo where it was very sincere, and it was like looking at it again recently, realizing he was sick and that he was saying goodbye in a way, and just got me, and it was unlike the other times on my birthday where he would send gifs of people getting pies in the face and that sort of thing. Very funny, and he kept sending them over, a whole bunch of them, like all day long. I was getting these gifs. But this last one that he sent was so sincere, and he told me how much he really liked me, and he said the moment I walked into the room for the audition that he knew right then and there that I was the guy, and just like melted me, So that's something I'm going to treasure for a long time.
That's so great. That's really true, and it makes me think about this age of social media in which something happens. And social media is full of tributes to people that, somebody we know and love dies every week. And the internet seems to be crowded with tributes to beloved people going one after another. I mean, it's been going on for weeks. My feed still has somebody coming on going, I can't believe we don't have Pee-wee anymore. And I remember the birthday tributes at Van Dyke Parks, of all people. His feed had a 1 minute cameo from Pee-wee, and it was just delightful. I was looking at it going, and he says, I don't really know you that well, but I like you. I think, and he describes Van Dyke.
Right. He goes,
and
it's me. He goes, it's me, Paul Reubens. Maybe you know me as Pee-wee.
Television's
Pee-wee Herman. And I'm really busy I'm busy right now. It was just hysterical.
So, like that well-honed, very, very funny, weirdly intimate, super close-up handheld, a little birthday tribute. They've been just showing up all over. And I'm like, what a cool legacy this guy has left. And I'm very happy for him that his career led to this kind of beloved, universally known as a warm, very detailed guy who sends these detailed, loving messages out. It's a really cool legacy, and I'm really happy for him.
Yeah, and I think reading his apology too, it's like, well, that was very sweet. That's just like him to be, very sincere and not trouble anybody with his illness.
Yeah.
And just like say, I love you all, and I love my fans, and it was a nice send off. It was beautiful.
And he leaves such an incredible life. By the way, we talked a lot about Pee-wee's Playhouse, but we don't talk about the fact that he will be he's in Call of Duty, for crying out loud. Like, he did video games too, and he's also been he's also did some voices of Robot Chicken as well. He was also the Riddler in that, and there's some very unknown voices that he actually had in there, which I think a nice little Easter eggs, which I'm sure people are going to find.
I mean, there's a lot of examples. He was the Moon in Tim and Eric Awesome Show, Great Job. He was Batmite in Batman the Brave and the Bold. He was Pavel in Tron Uprising. He was Ruben in Chowder. He did a lot of major roles in various projects that, a lot of people, they know about, but I know that they don't know it compared to Pee-wee. But I mean,
if I'm correct as well, I think there's most of the stuff that he's done where he's uncredited as well.
That's about right.
There's other media out there that we might don't know about, and all of a sudden we'll hear that voice, and it's like, oh wow, that's Paul.
Pee-wee stuff will turn up for years. People will say, "Oh, that's actually Paul Reubens."
Yeah. So I think that's the great thing about it, is that he's never gonna go away. Like, everybody will remember Pee-wee, and if it's not gonna be Pee-wee, it's gonna be somebody. Paul Reubens is going to be with us for he may not be with us now physically, but he's gonna be with us, in our nostalgia, and also for a very, very long time, as long as we all remember him.
Yeah. I guess I'll just wrap things up. So I remember one of the reasons why people fell in love with the show in the first place was because of the message of it was okay to be different. And whether it be because you were weird, or whether it be because you look different, or whether because you acted different, or whether it because of any reason, it was a place where you got to belong, and you got to be surrounded by people who were similar to you. And I've been seeing a lot of posts recently on social media saying, like, I related to the show. I grew up with it because I related to Reba the Mail Lady or Cowboy Curtis because they were African American like me. Or I related to Pee-wee because he was like a weirdo like me, and he was like very active. And I still try to keep up with that optimism every day, even in this cynical world. And I think that with a lot of the performances that he's done, whether it be with his smaller roles or whether it be with his voice acting stuff, it's kind of funny about how people seem to fondly remember all the things that he did when, I'm sure that we talked about this early in the podcast, where all the stuff that he was doing at the time was pretty controversial, of course, and trust me, in this day in Hollywood there's a lot worse, but I digress. But I'm glad that people are actually like giving their tributes. I mean, I've seen in his star in the Hollywood Walk of Fame, they're surrounded by flowers, and in the house where Pee-wee's Big Adventure was filmed at, it's surrounded by flowers, and the dinosaurs, there's so many cards saying thank you and stuff like that. And I think that people are going to miss him. And like I said earlier in the podcast, where I mean, I probably would have still continued with Old School Lane, but in a way, he kind of helped me get that boost of getting myself started. Like, I don't think if it wasn't for him sharing my, my post back in 2011, I don't know if I would still be continuing this. I don't know if I would be meeting up with all the people that I met up with over the years. I don't know if I would even be meeting up with you, Aaron. So.
Yeah, exactly. And that's how wonderful Pee-wee Herman is. Like, here's my fiance. So,
Yeah.
Hey, congrats.
Thank you.
Thank you. So.
Yeah, but all I have to say is I just want to say to you guys and to Diane, thank you so much for coming on by. We really do appreciate it.
It was our pleasure, I think.
Thank you too.
So,
Great
yeah.
to meet you, Kevin. What great
Nice
work you've done, man.
Yeah,
those characters are eternal.
Oh, well, thank you. Yeah, it's fun.
Lori.
It's all good for street cred, right?
That's right.
Hey, street cred.
Yeah, street cred, absolutely.
Cool.
All right. Well, why don't you guys plug and promote your stuff? Tell people where they can find you at.
Okay.
Oh,
I'm
go ahead.
Arun of the Arun Meta Show. If you will find me on Twitter, or for X, Twitter, whatever they call it, whatever it is before it crashes and burns into the ground, it's Arun Meta Show, ARUNMEHTASHOW. I'm also on Threads on the same name as well, and also if you want to ask me a question on Tumblr, it's arunmeta.tumblr.com. And if you also want to find me on Instagram, I'm also at Arun Meta Show as well. I want to give a shout out to Preston North End. They are doing very well at the moment, so anybody who is yet to get a season ticket for one of my beloved teams that has been going since 1880 and currently right now playing 5th in the championship, please go to pne.com and support my wonderful football team, and who knows, maybe I end up in the Premier League one day. So,
Excellent. I'm Kevin Carlson 1962 at Instagram, and on Facebook you can see me as Kev Tooth, because I created the Timmy the Tooth video series for Universal back in the early 90s, I guess. Yeah.
Awesome.
Cool. I'm Craig Bartlett on Instagram.
And congratulations on your Ready, Jet, Go movie.
Oh, thank you so much. Exactly. That was a thrill to get that finished.
Yes. And as for me, you can follow my work. I'm at oldschoollane.net. I have Facebook. I have Twitter, Instagram. You can follow me on my podcast feeds on Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Radio Public, all those places. New episodes of the podcast will go there first, and they'll go up in a few days on YouTube. Except for this one, I am going to be posting this on Paul Reubens' birthday, which is going to be at the day of his memorial. So in the comments below, share your memories of Paul, whether it be through his Pee-wee role or whether it be through his other stuff. Let us know if you were first introduced to him through the movies or through the TV show or even through the late night stuff. Let us know. I'm going to conclude this podcast with all of you guys sharing your tributes to Paul Reubens. So until then, everyone, take care. Bye-bye.
Ciao.
Ciao. Thanks, Patricia. Thanks, Aaron.
Bye. Thank you, Kevin.
Craig.
good night.
When Paul Reubens passed away, I admit I was pretty stung. I admit I did not watch Pee-wee's Playhouse a lot as a kid. I have memories of watching it, like, when they were having, like, rain delay recess in school. But the show is kind of old news and not really old enough to be retro when I was a kid. So I didn't watch the show a lot, but I still knew who Pee-wee Herman was. And, that speaks to what a force of personality Paul Reubens and Pee-wee Herman were, that, like, even if you didn't watch the show, you had to know who he was. I remember I watched the movie Pee-wee's Big Adventure. I remember watching that as a kid, and I still love that movie. And a lot of people consider the Large Marge moment the scary moment, and, that's a great scene, but the hospital nightmare, that was the scene that really scared me as a kid, when they're boiling his car and the doctor has a clown face. It's also thinking about what a chameleon Paul Reubens was as an actor. Like, there are a lot of roles where, I watched certain movies as a kid and then I realized, holy crap, that was him? One that I think he deserves a lot more credit for is he has an absolutely hilarious cameo in the Buffy the Vampire Slayer movie, the one with Christy Swanson. If you haven't seen it, see it. But another one that I really remember is, as a kid, I am one of the few people who saw Mystery Men in theaters, and the movie had an eclectic cast, and I remember being so blown away that Paul Reubens was in it, and, thinking that he was... I didn't even realize that he was still doing stuff, that he was doing movies like Matilda and Blow. Man, thinking about the fact that he did stuff he was doing stuff that came out this calendar year, like his last TV role was a guest spot in Bob's Burgers, and I watched that episode not realizing that it would be the last new, at least one of the last new pieces of Paul Reubens content. One of the things I watched when he passed away is, I said before I didn't watch much of Pee-wee's Playhouse. What I do remember watching is Comedy Central used to show his special, the Pee-wee Herman show, which was pretty much the pilot for Pee-wee's Playhouse. And, man, I have super fond memories of watching that as a kid. I feel like I appreciate it a little more now just because, the effort and the energy put into that. I'm gonna miss Paul Reubens. He was just one in a million.
I know this may be surprising to hear coming from someone known as a TV connoisseur who grew up in the 1980s, but I never really was, as a kid, a huge fan of Pee-wee Herman or really anything that Paul Reubens ever made, but now looking back as an adult, there's a lot to respect for the man because he stayed true to himself. This is someone who created a character who was as original as anyone could ever possibly do, and he used that character to make good on his desires to make other people happy and entertain them. And even through the ups and downs he suffered through his own personal life, he continued to strive toward that mission to make other people happy. It was really what mattered to him more than anything else up until the very end. And that's something that truly can be admirable. And it's a way that people like him will live on because of those people he made happy.
My earliest memory of Paul Reubens is watching Pee-wee's Playhouse on CBS on Saturday mornings as a kid. I remember the very calm, very mellow intro before it just took a nosedive into insanity and manic energy. Pee-wee's Playhouse could have really profound moments, but it was also just this wild, chaotic mess that just was a lot of fun to watch. I wasn't as big of a fan of the movies. I do remember the first one where Pee-wee's bike goes missing, and the scene from that movie that stands out in my mind is, of course, the one with the ghostly truck driver, because that scene scared the crap out of me as a kid. I kind of fell out of Pee-wee's Playhouse before the show ended, but Pee-wee Herman always kind of lingered in the back of my mind as I got older. So I do have a lot of fond memories of the man, and of Paul Reubens, the character he portrayed, his most famous character, and just... I guess I still don't know how I feel about his passing, other than just, I know it's sad, but there's this huge part of me that still can't believe he's gone.
Paul Reubens was an actor whose work I didn't fully appreciate until later in life. When I was a kid, I would watch Pee-wee's Playhouse regularly and enjoyed all the funny sketches, the puppets, the jokes between Pee-wee and his friends, and didn't think much more of it than that. It wasn't until I was in college, when older media was more easily accessible online, that I was able to see his work from a new perspective. I watched a few clips from his HBO specials and guest appearances he had on other shows, and I got a better understanding of what Paul was going for with his career. Like Jim Henson, the superficial aspects of his performance gave off a just-for-kids vibe, but when you paid attention, there was a greater depth to his comedy that could be enjoyed by people of every age, with subversive, avant-garde humor that would fly over your head if you weren't paying attention. I am glad he was able to rebuild his career after the overblown scandals, even if he never reached the heights of his Pee-wee Herman days again, and he helped introduce a new generation to his unique brand of humor. Paul Reubens left a great legacy, and hopefully he's encouraged many other performers to embrace the abstract, the bizarre, and the outright silly in their acts.
Hi everybody, it's Lynne Stuart. I played Missy Vaughn on Pee-wee's Playhouse. I would like to say a few words because it's Paul Reubens' birthday, and this is just an open love letter to him. I'd like to say thank you. Thank you for making me Missy Vaughn. I had the time of my life. When I was a little girl, other little girls wanted to get married. I didn't. I wanted to be Sandra Dee, and I wanted to do charity events. And I got to do that as Mrs. Yvonne. As Miss Yvonne. I could do as many charity events as I want to, and I did one almost every week. And Sandra Dee played a large part in creating Miss Yvonne. So thank you, Paul, for making a little girl's dream come true. I also, as a child and as a teenager, loved making up little dances. And I got to do those dances on the Pee-wee Herman show and also on Pee-wee's Playhouse. I got to do ballet on the Pee-wee Herman show and salsa, ballet, the Hawaiian war dance, clogging. I got to do whatever I wanted to. And thank you for that, because I had a blast. And I love you, and I miss you. And happy, happy birthday, Paul. Bye-bye.